In the book of Genesis, the 14th chapter, starting with verse 13, we have the account of Lot, Abraham's nephew, being captured by the enemy. He's captured by the four kings. So when Lot gets captured, somebody gets free, and he runs and tells Abraham. And the first thing you see when this guy gets to Abraham, the Bible tells you that Abraham is a Hebrew. Out of all the things you could say, but you say he's a Hebrew. Not only does he say he's a Hebrew, but the scripture says that Abraham is living in the land of Mamre, up under the trees of Mamre, with Mamre, his brother Aner, and his brother Eshcol, and that they own a covenant with Abraham. So the first thing, Abraham's a Hebrew. Huh. That's wild. Okay, so the word Hebrew is spelled He, Ayin, Bet Resh, Yod. In the Hebrew language, every letter has a meaning, or it has a thought attached to it. It's different from English. Like I've said before in other videos, my name is Antonio. It starts with the letter A. The letter A means nothing. It's just a letter. But in Hebrew, every letter has a thought attached to it. So the word Hebrew is, again, He, Ayin, Bet Resh, Yod. That's in this text in verse 13. A He is a man with his hands out, representing revelation. When it's at the beginning of a word, it means the. It does. So at the beginning of this word is the. So the next letter is Ayin. Ayin is an eye, represents knowledge and understanding. A bet is a tent. It represents where somebody lives. A resh is a head, representing the authority, somebody, the one that's in charge. And the yod at the end is a hand representing work. But when the letter yod is at the end of a word, it's talking about ownership, mine. So you got all this put together. So you got the word the, as in hey. Ayin is understanding. So bet resh. In Hebrew, bet resh is a word by itself, bar. And it represents a son. It does. Just like ben means somebody's son, so does bar, like bar mitzvah. So you got the definition we're given is it means the people that crossed over. But in pictograph form, goodness, these are the people that have the knowledge and understanding of my son. That's what God is telling you. Okay. So that's the first thing they tell you about Abraham in verse 13, that he's a Hebrew. Then it tells you that he's living in the land of Mamre, the three brothers, which that's fine. He's living with some guys he just met. But the Bible gives a detail that you might not understand, that they own a covenant. And for many of us, we're like, whatever. But if you don't know what the word covenant means, it will blow your mind. Okay, the word covenant, and I know I'm doing some definitions that really don't make any sense to you, but stick with me. So Barit, which is the word for covenant, is Bet Resh Yod Tav. So we know what Bet Resh is. It's the word son. And we know what Yod is, which is hand. It represents work. But this last letter is a Tav. It's the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It's represented by a cross. And the meaning of this cross is the covenant. Goodness. So the word for covenant, Barit, means the son's work at the cross. Goodness. Now these three brothers, Mamre, Eshcol, and Aner, owned a covenant with Abraham. That's what scripture says in verse 14. Why does this even matter? What type of covenant could they actually have? In most of our Bibles, it doesn't even say they own a covenant. It says a confederacy. Where in the world would you get confederacy when the word is covenant? Sometimes when you do your research, you'll find out that they will substitute words to make it seem like that these two groups aren't really together. That one is greater, that Abraham is greater than these three brothers. That they were inferior to Abraham, which is not the truth. Not at all. Okay, so for them to own a covenant, now most people think they don't really own a covenant, that it was an equal partnership. It was not equal. Not at all. If you knew what these three guys represented, you would understand why they owned the covenant. Uh, so Abraham is living in the land of Mamre. And the Bible tells you that these three brothers are Amorites. And the word Amorite represents the word. The name Mamre means the word. You know, John 1:1, in the beginning was the word. That's what this is getting at. And if you don't believe me, go back to the Jewish Targums. In the Jewish Targums, it tells you what the word is or who the word is. And it's spelled the same way the name Mamre is spelled. This is significant because throughout history, we've been telling people that God had cursed Ham's descendants when he had not. Oh, goodness. In this text, God flattens every lie because he uses three guys that are descendants of Canaan, who are descendants of Ham, to show you the picture of the Messiah. Okay, let's get to it. So the name Mamre means the word. So Abraham is living in the land of the word when his nephew is taken. Yes. Eshcol represents the new wine, meaning the new covenant. Oh, goodness, he does. And then Aner represents the new priesthood, a priesthood that is greater than Aaron's priesthood. This priesthood is way before Aaron. So they own a covenant. So this covenant is based upon these three brothers. It is not based upon Abraham. Not at all. Why does this matter? Because the covenant of salvation has nothing to do with us. It was all about Christ's death on the cross. We had nothing to do with him dying. There's nothing we can do to save ourselves. That's why this covenant is based upon these three guys. This is what God is trying to show you in Scripture. When we let racism and discrimination, the things that we've been taught, when we've let this creep in, we can't see the Messiah. You can't. Because you think three guys are beneath Abraham. Okay, let's keep moving. So these three guys own a covenant. It's a covenant for salvation, but it's also for a covenant for the land. And the reason why it's a covenant for the land, because these three guys own all of this land. And later on, you'll find out that the land that they own, the 12 tribes of Israel ends up owning. This is the land of Canaan. The covenant between these three brothers, these three Amorites, and Abraham are based upon their word. Goodness. Abraham can't give them anything. Abraham doesn't have enough to give to these three brothers for them to actually run and fight for him. And secondly, to give his progeny all this land. There's nothing Abraham can give. So the land of Canaan was part of the covenant that these three brothers and Abraham had. These three brothers represents the Messiah. Okay. So the deal is, Lot gets captured. And somebody runs and tells Abraham that his nephew has been captured. So Abraham gets some of his men and these three brothers, and they go after the enemy. They go after the enemy to the boundaries of Canaan. They do. To the boundaries of Aner, where Aner's land ended. The funny part is that these three brothers fight for Abraham, fight to rescue Lot. And remember, Mamre's name means the word. So all three of these brothers are part of the word. So you got the word that became flesh. That's who Mamre is. He's the word in the flesh. Goodness. He goes forth to fight for Abraham. Then you got the word That's the new wine that represents the new covenant. He goes and fights for Abraham to rescue Lot. Then you have the word in the new priesthood. He runs out and fights for Abraham to rescue Lot. So you got the word going out before Abraham, fighting on his behalf, rescuing the lost. These three brothers didn't only just rescue Lot and the people he was with. They rescued kingdoms. For many of us, we think in the Old Testament, it was all about just the Jews. Nobody else would ever get saved. You had to be Abraham's descendant. That's it. You had to be from his bloodline, his blood. And that is not true. Goodness. Salvation has always been for everybody. It has been. We've concocted this thing. Well, we just believe that only Abraham's descendants could get saved. And that is not true. They had to know who the God of Abraham was. So anybody that learned who the God of Abraham was could be saved. It wasn't just Jews. It wasn't. Okay. So the word in three, man, that's deep. The word that's in three persons goes forth and fights on behalf of Abraham, saves 5 kingdoms, destroys the enemy, brings back all 5 kingdoms, not only the people, but their stuff. Brought back everything. You have 3 brothers that represents the Messiah that we ignore because of who their daddy is or who they're from. They lived in the land of Canaan. These guys went out and chased down the enemy. And it didn't matter how far. It is an amazing thing when you research words and places. You thought you knew God pretty well at first. But when you start digging into stuff and finding the treasures that he's left. It was in the land of the word. My goodness. Okay, let me end this. This was Abraham and the 3 brothers.